Hello and welcome to Career Expert Roundtable. Thank you for joining us. I am here with Ronan. Ronan is her first time on Career Expert Roundtable, and the name of this episode is How to Master Selling Your Skills, Strengths, and Achievements. So we're going to be getting into that. So if you have a job interview coming up or any other situation where you're going to have to brag a little, try and promote yourself, but you either have a bit of a psychological barrier to that, or you don't know tactically what to do, what to say in order to do that. We're hopefully going to set you straight on that. So hello to Ronan. Welcome to Career Expert Roundtable.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, not a problem. And to everybody watching, you should see a comment box or a chat box somewhere near the video feed if you're watching on a device or on a computer or on a TV or anything like that. And this is being streamed to a couple of places. So wherever you are, I understand that we should be able to see your comment. And I guess we'll take comments as they come in and see where that goes. But there are 7 people here. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, so let's get into it. So Ronan, this is a topic that's of particular interest to you, the idea of there being a psychological barrier with selling oneself and how that can be a bit awkward.
Absolutely.
Take us away on this. Yeah.
So I'm from Ireland, Bill. I'm from Dublin, and I suppose a lot of people in Ireland feel like we find it very difficult to sell ourselves. We find it very difficult to talk about ourselves, to boast, to brag, whatever way you want to say it. And so people have been coming to me for just about 10 years, about a decade now, and asking me to help them sell themselves, help them figure out what it is their skills are, figure out what their value is, what they've got to offer, how to package that nicely, and then how to communicate it to either their existing employer or a potential new employer, or even a contact at a networking event. So I suppose the first thing is figuring out, what they want to say and how they want to say it. But there's also that other idea of feeling comfortable getting it across, because everyone wants to come across as genuine, as authentic, and as somebody that you ultimately want to do business with or you want to work beside. I think it's so important to be able to build relationships with people where you feel like there's trust and there's good rapport, and you can align yourself with what their needs and their requirements are, and not just impress them, right? Because if you think about it, if someone's just trying to impress you, do you really feel like you've got a good rapport with them and you can work with them, compared to somebody who's like really talking to you as a human and really trying to communicate with you one-to-one and figure out where you're at, what you need, and then if they can be the right fit. So there's some of the points I try to communicate to people. But I suppose one of the things I've learned over the years is that when people are talking about themselves, they feel like, and I don't know if this is the same stateside, but they feel like they're going to oversell, or they're going to over brag, or they're going to come across as negative things like cocky or arrogant, or all these sort of negative words. Do you have that sort of experience yourself, or?
Absolutely. Yeah. If people, a lot of people don't come from like a sales background, or even like something like a customer service background, where you're used to interacting with people a lot and, all this, people that come from operations, they come from skilled trades, they come from other areas where, talking about how good you are is not really something you do on a regular basis as part of your job, or even like it doesn't really come up in casual conversation that much. So when you're put in a situation where you have to sell yourself, you have to impress somebody, it feels, I imagine, very, very awkward for a lot of people. They don't know how to approach this. They have more of an emotional kind of aversion to doing this. And even if they are wondering, like, how do you do it before you even get there, they just feel weird doing this in the first place. And it's almost like how would you say, it's almost like you don't even give yourself permission to go to that place, and brag.
Exactly. You don't even give yourself a chance. And then we're at the same time, we know it's funny because we're also hoping that someone else gives us a chance, or they can like pull it out of us or drag it out of us. And a lot of people
Yeah.
also say to me, I could sell you, or I could sell that person or that person. I could sell somebody on my team and tell you how great they are. But when it comes to talking about myself, that's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So I think a lot of people, like, before you even get to the tactics and the phrases and how you do it, they just are uncomfortable to begin with doing anything like this. So I mean, that's the first thing. And the challenge, of course, is that in life you're going to encounter a variety of situations where you're required to do this. The most common being something like a job interview. I mean, there's several. Like just before the chat, we talked about networking events. If you're in that world, you do that kind of thing. One of the things you're going to be communicating is, your achievements, or, why someone would interact with you, why they would employ you, why they would partner with you, why they would do business with you. And you're going to have to give them reasons why they would want to do that. If you're having to do a presentation, right? You present either as part of a group or just as yourself. Usually a lot of presentations, you're trying to persuade someone to do something, either to think in a certain way or to physically go and do something. So these skills become very relevant for that. Um,
absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know,
Because it's like the questions the audience are asking, or the questions that the job interviewer are asking, is why should we trust you? How do we know that you're going to be able to do it? Are you going to be a good person for the job? And are you the type of person who we want to work alongside with? These are all these are some of the unsaid or unasked questions that people have in interviews, right?
yeah,
Um, do I want to work with this person? Do I trust them? Do I feel we have a good rapport? Do I feel we have a good bond? And so being able to communicate that we are the right fit for the role, but also that we're going to be someone they're going to want to work with is really important.
yeah. And
Um,
something you mentioned earlier about the need these days, a lot of people are being asked to increase their visibility at work, right? So just whatever job you have, whether you're used to doing this kind of thing or not, you're not even in a job interview or any special situation or event. This could just be in your, your regular day job, just in your regular environment. You're being asked to do more of this kind of activity. So it's relevant
absolutely.
for people that are facing that too. So
Yeah.
yeah,
This idea of visibility in the workplace, or visibility in the office, is coming up more and more. And you can notice it particularly in the big tech companies like Facebooks and Google and all those sort of companies. Um, they're really looking for people to continuously sell themselves, not just for promotions, but just their ongoing projects, their ongoing work, to communicate with their team through the internal social media network or the external social media network, or in meetings, what they're doing, what they've achieved, what their key deliverable results have been, so that everyone knows that it's a high performing culture, and so that everyone knows who is to watch, or who's earmarked for the promotion or the next step up the ladder. So it's this ongoing visibility exercise that we're being asked to do.
definitely. And I see we've got some questions coming in here. If I'm saying this correctly, Mattia Fazio says, "Hi there. I was just watching your videos. Um, I have an interview for a Bank of America Spring Week application soon. Do you have any tips on how to concisely summarize your experiences?" Now, I think what we'd like to do is we'd like to sort of gradually get into this. I'd like to talk about the sort of psychological barrier to doing this and how you overcome that, and then I'd like to proceed to maybe the tactics of what you say and how you actually go about doing this. But just to kind of kick this off, if I could ask you, Ronan, if Mattia Fazio came to you
Mm-hmm.
and had a psychological barrier to doing this, what advice might you have for someone like Mattia that was just, they're not used to doing this kind of
Mm-hmm.
dialogue, they're not used to talking up themselves. What would you have any advice for someone in that
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So if Mattia came to me, I would be saying, like, so really, we don't want to sell you as more than you are. We certainly don't want to sell you as less than you are. We want to sell you as exactly as you are, so that you can really convince people in the most trustworthy way possible. And so when you think about it, a lot of people are worried about overselling, or maybe even some cases underselling, when they don't know how to like he said, put together his his summary or his professional brand to communicate in an interview. You want to think about this as protecting the interests of both people, protecting the interests of you and protecting the interests of the employer, so that you're helping them make the best possible choice possible. You're helping them understand exactly what you've got to offer, and you're communicating authentically. And that way, if you get the role, it's going to be a really good match. And that's ultimately what you want to have. You want to go into a job where you have a good match, where they know the value you can bring, and where you've communicated that clearly. So instead of thinking about it as underselling yourself or overselling yourself, you want to think about yourself as selling yourself accurately and protecting the interests of everyone involved. And if you undersell yourself, you're definitely not doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you know, to try and sort of think about this, I think that a good way to approach this is to think what you can do for the other party. So if you've got a Bank of America job interview coming up and you're wondering, okay, how do I, as you said here, how do I concisely summarize my experiences? Well, obviously you've had a lot of experience. You can do a lot of different things and you have done a lot of things. Um, if you had, say, only 2 sentences worth of talk time to say to them what what are your experiences, I would phrase it in the form of what can you do for them. So let's say, I don't know, I mean, I don't know what you do at the bank, but let's say you do, I don't know, loan approvals or something like this. You know, you've got 5 years experience working in a bank doing loan approvals, where you use the bank's internal IT system and their ERP system to process loan applications, and then the ERP system tells you, whether this person is approved or not, and you have to enter in any extenuating circumstances or mitigating factors, anything like this, and then you process all of this and you complete the paperwork internally, and then you talk to the client and tell them, advise them of the result. Okay, something like that. Let's say that's your job. So if you had to sort of go down to a job interview where you're interviewing for this role that you've done, but at another bank, um, give me 2 sentences of like a high level, what can you do for them? So it might look something like saying, well, here's what I can do for you. I've got 5 years experience processing loans, so I can process loans. I have an extremely low error rate. I do it efficiently. I do it very quickly. I can process this many claims per week. And I'm fully aware of all the different extenuating circumstances and all the way those are handled. So I can do all of that with minimal training. And I'm fully adept at going and advising the end user of the outcome of the approval system and explaining the results to them so they understand why the outcome is what it is. Something like that. This is what I can do for you at like a very high level. So it's like you're kind of bragging, but you're like Ronan just said, you're not sort of like talking up more than what you do, and you're not selling yourself short. This is something that you're capable of delivering to them, and it has a big impact, and it has value, presumably, for the Bank of America, because they're looking for someone to do this very thing. So maybe that's one way to look at it, is just like
Yeah.
what you can do, something
It's
like
a
that.
it's a it's a great point. Yeah, you're talking about exactly what I would say as well. Your skills. So what can you do? What are those key skills that you can do that you've successfully delivered before? And you're matching it to the requirements that they have in their role. So you're saying, this is what you need, this is what I can do, and you're putting those together and you're delivering in that in a very concise way, 1 or 2 sentences, like you said yourself. Bill, can I ask, what would you think of Matthew also adding in an achievement that is relevant to the role?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Like I'm sure, like in my scenario that I just sort of made up, which was that Mattia has 5 years experience doing this activity. I'm sure you would have had many achievements. You would have processed maybe very complicated loan applications. You would have processed simple applications, but you've been so efficient at it that you can do a high volume of them in a very short time. Like in an hour, you can process 50 or something, which is very impressive. And you could pull any one of those out and use it as an achievement that illustrates your value, like how capable you are.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love the way you've added in some ideas for potential metrics there, which really clarify and solidify the value, right? Because that's something we can really talk around. Like, how did you achieve that metric? You could talk about the volume, the speed, the efficiencies, the cost effectiveness, whatever it might be. And that really makes it a very tangible piece of information for us to ask about in an interview.
Yeah,
And we can also compare it to our own internal processes.
yeah, like Ronan. I mean, I get the impression that there's a lot of people out there that even doing that much is like quite is a real stretch for them because of the psychological stuff we talked about earlier. You know, they're not used to sort of talking about themselves, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not used to talking about themselves in a way that's supposed to sort of punch up, you know, how good they are. Because I think, you know, especially people that are tuned in that have very good manners, like, isn't that one of the things that, you know, you're conditioned since you're very, very young, you know, is to sort of don't brag, don't boast, be humble. You know, if
Mm-hmm.
somebody says, you know, thank you, you say, oh, you know, it was nothing, you know, like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
you know, you kind of just bring
No
everything down,
worries,
you
no
know?
big deal, right?
Yeah.
Always downplay everything, right?
Yeah. How often does somebody say, you know, they say, thank you for doing that. And you say, oh, well, you know, that's just a sample of what I can do for you. It
Yeah,
doesn't come natural to talk to people like that and sort of punch up your own value and achievements and all this kind of stuff. It's very, I think it's very artificial for a lot of people.
it is. It is. Well, and it's definitely very specific to this one environment where we are in work, and then talking up what we do is a little bit more necessary. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that you go out into the cafe or the bar or the restaurant tomorrow and you start telling everyone all your achievements and your big responsibilities and adding in some metrics there. You don't want to be that guy.
Drink 10 pints and
Yes.
then tell anyone who wants to hear all about
Although,
how good
although,
you are. Yeah.
although some people still do it, but I'm not saying it's a good idea. You can lose the room, you can lose the crowd, you can lose the crowd really quickly.
You could lose the
Um,
pub. Yeah.
you can lose the pub really quickly. So, like one thing I found has been useful for people is giving them some set phrases that allow them to say what they want to say, but still sprinkle in a little bit of humility or a little bit of modesty in there. So like, let's say the achievement is, you delivered 20 workshops inside 1 month and you increase sales by, 15% or something like that. You could, you can just say it like that, right? And it might sound a little bit braggadocious, or you can say, fortunately, I've had a wonderful team who has supported me while I've been able to deliver the workshops. And, thanks to a really great mentor, I was able to find some tactics that allowed me to increase, so you can kind
Yeah.
of, you can attribute some credit to other people, or you can attribute credit to your education, or you can say, yeah, you can express gratitude or appreciation. And those types of phrases tend to sound a little bit softer.
Yes, definitely. Um,
They should anyway.
yeah, it's like it's okay. So I mean, like going back to Mattia just says you're right. Thank you, I appreciate it. Well, that's very kind of you, Mattia. I'm glad that seems to you approve of that response to it. That's good. But like when you describe what you do at your job, does that feel like bragging? You know, like some people have an aversion to anything resembling bragging. Does it feel like you're bragging and boasting? It I don't believe it does. I feel you're just accurately describing what you do. You know,
Mm,
you're maybe sort of saying this is the effect of what I do rather than listing your duties,
mm,
you know, but it's still an accurate description of what you do. So hopefully uh it doesn't people don't have an issue saying that kind of thing because it sounds too much like you're bragging about yourself.
mm.
It should sound like you're giving an accurate appraisal of what your capabilities are, you
Absolutely,
know?
absolutely. Well, there's an element of that. There's an element of fear about, I don't want to oversell or I don't want to come across as
Yeah.
bragging. But then there's also an element of, I find it really hard to say what I do. Like
Yeah.
I've had tons of people come to me and they say, I don't know what I do. And of course, they're being a little bit, they're being a little bit funny because, of course, they know what they do. They're often excellent at what they do. What
Yeah,
they
they're
mean is
putting themselves down quite a bit because they know what they do and they know that what they do is
right,
valid, right? Yeah. Yeah.
right, or they know what they do, but they find it hard to describe what they do.
Yes.
So sometimes that can, if they're saying I don't know how to describe what I do, it can come across. It can sound they can actually say I find it hard to sell myself, or they can say I don't want to oversell myself or something like that. So then, really, when they have the language to simply describe what they do, it can ease some of those fears. I don't know. Do you ever find that yourself, Bill?
Definitely. I think that, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but it's hard to describe this, but it's almost like, um, there are some people that, at a guess, I would say it's the more technically minded people out there that, they do a job, and if you ask them to tell you about an accomplishment that they've had, they will draw a blank because they don't see what they do as particularly, uh, as any kind of real accomplishment. They take the attitude that, oh, anyone could be able to do this. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
not accurate. They're selling themselves short. They think that, oh, I just followed the instructions. I just did what anyone would do. I
Yes.
just told, my listened to what my boss told me to do and I did it. Like, what's the accomplishment in that? So they don't see it as an accomplishment. They see it as something totally routine because they regard it as totally routine, right?
Yep.
So when you then
Absolutely.
ask them, what's your value, or, tell me about your most impressive accomplishment in your job, they'll draw a blank. And just bear with me for a second. I was just watching a movie called Sid and Nancy about Sid Vicious. The bass player is like 1979 for the
Okay.
Sex Pistols, right? One of the most obnoxious people I think who ever lived. Now imagine if you got Sid Vicious to do your job for you. Okay, he would probably make a big mess. He'd start a trash fire in the room. Your job involved picking up the phone to talk to anyone, he'd be mouthing off to them, ending all kinds of relationships, like this, and it would be a complete disaster, right? Now, compared to that, what would be your value, right? You could say, well, for a start, if you put me in charge of these duties, I can do these duties. I do them on time. I do them as per your expectations. I do them on budget. If there's an issue, I will independently come and seek advice or seek help, or at least make you aware of it so that it can be rectified. If there's any kind of inappropriate situation that occurs, I will follow the company rules. I will do everything appropriately, things like this, right? So now you're starting to see maybe what your value is, instead of hiring Sid Vicious to do your job, right? You're much better at your job because you will do all of these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And they are definitely bragging points where if you're
100%.
trying to illustrate your value, you could start, listing all of these off and you would have a lot to say when you think about it. Right.
Absolutely,
You know?
absolutely. Well, what do you say when somebody comes to you, Bill, and they say, "I just do my job. That's what I do." Um,
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people are stuck. Like that's all you can think of when you're in this situation,
so
you
if you
know?
say "Can you tell me about yourself?" or "Can you tell me why you're interested in this job?" or "Can you tell me about your achievements?" and they'll say, "I just do my job. That's what I do."
Yeah.
It's like they don't really feel the need. They don't feel the need, or they don't see the need to have to sell themselves because they feel their work demonstrates their skills and their abilities already. So they're more like, look at my work. But
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah. I don't
that
think they
work can
see
be
it.
hard
They
to
don't
see, though,
see it
right?
as impressive, I think, is the problem. Like
Right.
they're very humble people. They don't see what they do as particularly impressive.
Hmm.
They feel like they do their job okay, but they don't see it as some like incredible, earth-shattering, thing that's newsworthy that you would have to shout from the
Hmm.
rooftops. Uh, so yeah, I think what you described, where somebody says, "I just do my job." I think there's a lot of people that's the response they would give, and they have a hard time sort of uh, doing what we're talking about here, which is like selling yourself and sort of talking up the value that you actually have. Um, I think
Yeah.
I think a lot of people fall into that.
I think a
I see
simple
there's another
way to think
question
about.
here.
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a simple way to distinguish the difference and the value of actually
Mhm,
talking about yourself and telling people why you're going to be a good fit is like, so one of the analogies I give people is if you think of potatoes, right? If somebody was selling you
mhm,
chips and they just said chips, right? How many
mhm. Yeah.
euro or how many dollar would you expect to pay for chips? Sorry, we'd say chips. You guys would say French fries, right? Uh, so that's
Well,
what I
I'm the
mean, right?
exception. I say chips because I have some connections over there. But yeah,
Okay,
but
okay,
yes,
okay, okay.
I'm on the same level. Yes.
So if we're talking about like hand cut potato, but if you talk about organic hand cut potatoes, slow roasted with three different types of dips and seasoning, how much would you pay for those compared to how much you would pay for chips or French fries?
Yeah.
So the way we describe them and the words that we use can often attribute a higher level of value and more accurate value. And that's why we see when you go to, if you get the chance to go to a nice restaurant, often they describe the food in a very colorful, creative, artistic way because we attribute more value. And that's kind of what we're saying about people talking about their skills and their value.
Yes, and you bring up a great point. I think that to a certain degree, the volume of what you say makes a case for how good you are, right? So to return to the situation where someone is asked to talk up what they do, like what's your greatest accomplishments, what's the value you bring, or a question to that effect. Now, if you just say like 5 words and you say, "Oh, I do this job very well,"
Mhm.
like that has maybe some impact, but if you were able to list 10 points one after another and say like, "Oh, I always show up to work on time, I'm never sick, and I always follow all company rules to the T. I take them very seriously. You know, uh, you know, part of being professional is acting professional, and so I always follow all company rules." And then that was 2 points, and you keep going. "Oh, my job is to do this particular activity. Well, I do that, and I take pride in my work, and I always make sure that I scan what I've done before I complete it to make sure that I don't have any errors in what I do." So like the more points you give, the more value you're conveying. So the more things you can say when someone asks you that. If you say, 1 point, that might be good. But if you could say 10 points, and if they prompt you for more, you could keep going, right? That
Absolutely,
will have more
absolutely,
value, right? The
absolutely.
volume does count.
Like if somebody's selling you a car and they say this, and you say, "Can you tell me about the car?" and say, "It's a red car." That's not quite the
Yeah.
same as saying the engine power, the horsepower, how many seats it has,
Yeah.
the
You
previous
say, "Oh, look at
owners.
the cup holders, very luxurious. Lots of, you'll never have a problem of, no matter if you take this through a drive-through or, whatever, you get any kind of food, you'll never have an issue of, where to put your food in your car, oh, the engine, this engine that's in this car, it's based on the engine that won the Formula One in like, 1950, blah, 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 right? Like the more points you give, right, the more people see the value in it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
Someone who tunes in just now is going to think that we're selling cars,
yes.
or or
Well,
French fries.
it's good to very it's interesting when you come up with different examples. That's the thing. Now there was another question here. So Alex Laszlo, is that, says, "Last week I had a second round interview and I prepared a 60-day plan on how I will handle the role, even though it was not required, trying to get leverage. Is that a good way to sell yourself?" Okay, so a 60-day plan. Do you have any thoughts on this one, Alex? I'm still trying to parse this.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
60-day
So,
plan.
so the question is it good to have a 60-day plan if you're selling yourself for an interview and hoping to get leverage? Yeah, I think if you're going for high level strategic roles, you
Yeah,
can often be asked for a 30, 60, 90-day strategic plan, or basically a plan of what you would do if you entered the role. I think it is a good idea to have it, even if you don't get asked for it. Um, as long as you align it to the strategic goals of the organization. And I guess you'd have to have some idea of what they were. So if you have a contact or if you know someone on HR or the recruiter has told you what the strategic goals of the organization are, and you can align your 60-day plan or your 30, 60, 90-day plan to that. I think that's going to show forward thinking, proactivity, and diligence. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it brings up, like, between the question and what you just said, Rona, it brings up something I was planning to we were going to talk about later, but we could maybe just jump into it. It the whole 60-day plan, or 30, 60, 90-day plan, uh the it I would say that it's more of an exotic thing, because when you sort of give somebody points about your value, either your accomplishments, your strengths, your traits, your experiences, all this kind of stuff, um, at the most basic level, we have the problem of thinking, what do I say? I could say one of like a million different things. What one is the most appropriate for me to say, or to say first, right? Now, in some situations, they've already explicitly told you what they're looking for, or what they regard as good, right? So if you're answering like a job ad, they say in the job ad, we're looking for someone who has 5 years experience in this, or these skills, or this experience. So it's like, okay, so they've already explicitly said what they regard as a good thing. So if you then turn around and say, well, I have 5 years experience in that, or I have these skills, you're saying something that one would expect them to find impressive, right? Because they've said, we regard these as good, we're looking for someone who has these. But in this particular case, where someone says, prepare a 60-day plan, right? Now we're in the realm of like trying to guess maybe what they are looking for, and what they would find good, or what they would find appropriate, right? Because if you just walk into a company, they said, we're looking for someone who has your skills. So you show up and they say, okay, good to meet you. Your name is Bill. Okay, great. Good to meet you, Bill. Now, what's your 60-day plan for our company, right? Like you might not know anything about them. So it would be hard to give an intelligent answer, because you don't know what problems they're struggling with. You don't know what their current situation is, or what any of their goals are, right? So
Yeah,
it's a bit of guesswork there,
there is guesswork, or is it a case where where it's more how you go about doing it as opposed to what you do?
That's a
So
good point.
if someone came to you, Bill, and said, "Oh, I'm going to make your YouTube channel double or triple in size," and they give you like these 10-point plan, and you're like, "Well, I don't want it done that way, but I like the way you've gone about this, so maybe we should start a conversation." The same way as we see a demonstration of food in a restaurant, or we see a demonstration of a trailer in a movie, we're like, okay, well, that's a good sample of what it could be. So I might like. So would you think it's more what you
I,
say, or
I
how
think
you
that's a
say it?
great point. I think that's a great point. I think, because the way I'm interpreting that is, like you're saying, it's not really about like what's an appropriate plan for us. We're only asking this question to see where your head's at, right? So like, if you don't know anything about a company, but yet you're asked to make a 60-day plan for them, right? We're doing this intentionally, because we want to see what you consider to be an appropriate, like, high level thing to do first, and then a high level thing to do second, and so on, right? Like, it's telling us about you. It's not really about making an accurate plan for our company. You don't know about our company. We just want to see what you consider to be important, and what you would put emphasis on. That tells
And
us about you.
the process you go through to figure those things out, or
Yeah,
how,
yeah,
what actual steps you use to map it out. Like Google famously were asking people these kind of Google questions, like how many ping pong balls would you fit on a 747 airliner?
yeah,
And they didn't, like, if you got the answer wrong, which everyone did, you wouldn't miss the job, you wouldn't lose the job, but they wanted to see the process you would go through of calculating that. Or if you're to go for a tech job as a product manager or product owner, they might ask you to do a whiteboarding session where they want to see how you go about figuring out users' needs, or how you go about figuring out like the project roadmap, or discussing the next features, or functionality, not
Yeah,
actually
you're
saying the
absolutely
perfect
right.
answer.
You're absolutely right. It's like they want to know about your thought process. It's not that they really need an answer to how many golf balls you put on a 747 or something. They just want to see what are your thought processes when confronted with that problem. And I got my own thoughts on those estimation questions. I find that they can be a little insulting if you're hiring technical people and you just want to see if they understand the general idea of rough estimation. Like, yes, if someone has like a degree in molecular biology or something, it's like, well, of course, it's like asking them about, do they know their times tables? Like, it's this kind of
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
little, but you're absolutely right. It's not meant to be like, you're not supposed to produce something accurate. They're just trying to reveal your thought processes. So to try and give Alex Laszlo a bit of an answer here, an actual answer, it says, I was not required to get leverage. Is that a good way to sell yourself? Um, I would. It's not bad as a way to sell yourself and say I'm going to volunteer a 60-day plan for you. But I think there are superior ways to sell yourself, simpler ways, and those would probably be just knowing how to summarize your strengths and your accomplishments and your abilities, very succinctly in a way that they can understand. And specifically, like what I said earlier about like, what can you do for them? You could say, well, I could, have this job. I could be up and running in under a week over the learning curve. I could be processing these claims or whatever at this many per day with very low error rate. And I could be training someone on how to do this within, say, 6 months, something like that, and say, like, that's what I can do for you.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that
100%.
would be a superior way of illustrating your value than sort of making a plan for them. But
Yeah.
it's not bad. You could pull it off if you do a good job. That would be my take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like really, if you think to yourself, if Alex thinks to himself and you ask yourself, well, what are they really looking for when they interview me, right? What's everyone really looking for? I think the answer is actually one word. I think it's certainty. I think
Mm.
they're looking for certainty. They're looking for certainty that you can do the job. They're looking for certainty that you're interested in the job and the company, and they're looking for certainty that they can work with you, that you're going to be a good person to have around. So when you're answering those types of questions and you're putting it together in the form of a pitch, um, you're looking at the job description, you're looking at the company, you're looking at what their products or services are, and on an interpersonal level, you're building that trust, that rapport, um, you know, with them, so that you package all that together and you can reassure them that you're going to be the person who can solve their problem, that you're going to be the right person for the job. Because any sort of doubt or uncertainty that comes up, um, that's going to, move you further away from that opportunity. So um, that can be the risk with the 60-day plan if they feel like you're building in more uncertainty. But if you're building in more certainty and if you're showing proactivity and building trust and building rapport, then it's going to be excellent. That would be my take on it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we talked about the psychological barriers of the beginning. I think we pretty much covered that. Unless you wanted to, did you want to talk about like victory stacking and increasing your visibility at work? I don't think we covered that.
Yeah, I think a good exercise to increase your visibility. In other words, for people to see what you do, how you do it, and the value that you're bringing to the company. Let's call that visibility. In order to increase your visibility, to build your confidence, and to prepare you for always being able to speak in meetings and say what you want to say about your own work, I think it's really good to do an exercise called victory stacking. This is where you write down one or two or three examples of what you've done well this week. Um, and you can use metrics if you can, or you can talk about the key results or the key outcomes if you can. But if you catalog these victories on a daily or weekly basis, it means whenever somebody asks you the question of what you did, what went well, what are you working on, what's coming up next, you're always ready and you're going to put yourself across well. You're going to present yourself in the best light. Like if somebody asked me tomorrow, how's work going or what did you do? I'm going to be able to say, well, I was very kindly invited to do a career expert roundtable with Bill. And it was a great opportunity to talk to a like-minded person and to share some ideas, right? So that's like a victory I would call this week, but everyone's got them. And it's about looking at them, whether they're small victories or large victories. When you keep on cataloging them, you get your brain always looking for the positive things. And I think it's a really good exercise for building confidence as well.
That makes a lot of sense. There, it reminds me of something very similar in the world of entrepreneurship, where the companies that tend to be successful and they tend to be going somewhere, they have a steady stream of news. There's always like
Mm.
something going on, like, oh, we just got this contract, or oh, we
uh,
just attended this
we
convention, and
launched this
you
new
know,
product feature, or
yeah, exactly. We hired this new person, or there's always something going on. And so if you were an investor and you had a portfolio of like little startup companies that you were investing in or something, you can kind of get a feel for the ones that are going to work out and go somewhere, because those are the ones that you're always hearing about. They're always saying, oh, here's the latest, we just had this accomplishment or this new milestone or something.
they're
The ones that
always selling.
Yeah, the ones that you never hear anything from, those are the ones that, generally speaking, they're less likely to work out, because there's
Right.
not a lot of things going on, not a lot happening. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, when you think
so
about it,
yeah.
Coca-Cola,
Mhm.
Coca-Cola never stops advertising, but everyone drinks Coke.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like, so you could extend that to employees and say, like, if you're always hearing about this, this employee in a good way, they've had this accomplishment, they finished this task, they took on these new duties, they undertook training this, the onboarding some people, they were given this job, they just went on a trip to this convention and come back from representing the company. It's like, okay, that person is happening, that person is working out, they're
Mhm.
moving forward, they're accomplishing goals, etc. Right? It's the employee that you have sort of in the corner that you never really hear progress updates or anything coming from them. They're less visible. That unfortunately that translates to, oh, they're not really happening. They're
Yeah.
not really achieving as much. Now we all know that this is not necessarily true, but what I'm saying is that those are the appearances. That's how it comes over to the person that's observing all this, maybe the boss or someone,
Yeah.
and that's
100%.
why increasing your visibility work. That's why it makes sense to me, like the victory stacking thing that you were talking about. Uh, so if anybody asks you, oh yeah, I just finished this and I've just taken on this, and like you have stuff to say, and it's like, oh, okay, so things are working out pretty well for you,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. It comes back to this overall really key point, whether it be for interviews or meetings or promotion conversations or networking, and it's intention, right? It's this
Mm,
word intention. Like, what do you want to get across? What do you want to say? What do you want people to come out of the meeting knowing or doing, or feeling? And so when you're communicating with that intention, you always know that I said what I wanted to say, or I've communicated exactly what I wanted to communicate with. And humans know, right?
mm.
Uh, we all know, we've got this like inbuilt sensor that what someone's intention is. If someone's intention is like really pure and genuine, you feel it. We're just like natural psychologists, I think, on that level. And if someone's intention is not clear, or we feel it's not genuine, we pick up on that, I would say, even quicker. I don't know.
Yeah,
Would
I
you
agree. Yes.
agree with those types of
Yeah, definitely.
assumptions?
I think that, like, especially job interviews, and I mean, when you think about it, a lot of these encounters that we talked about earlier, like networking events, presentations, or having an interview with your boss about possibly getting a promotion, uh, these are all very, very weighted to psychological issues.
Mhm.
Um, like something that we were talking about earlier was, it almost seems like how quickly you answer is a factor. Like if they say, what's your biggest accomplishment? And then you go, oh, geez, I don't know. And then, you don't just immediately blurt something out. You kind of, oh, I have to think about that. What
Mm.
is it this? Is it that? Right. That kind of says something. And in the end, it doesn't really matter too much what you say. The fact that you hesitated demonstrated that you didn't have an answer ready to go. Now, why didn't you have an answer ready to go? Is because is it not very obvious? You know, but if you ask another person, say, what's your biggest accomplishment? They say, oh, well, it would have to be this, where I did this and blah, blah, blah. And I was commended and I was promoted for it. That I regard that as certainly my biggest accomplishment professionally, something like that. And then it's like, oh, okay, so you tend to know your value a bit better, and you have something very clear to say when
Mhm.
someone asks you that question. It doesn't matter what you said. It's the fact that you didn't hesitate. It was right at the forefront of your mind. Um, and people will sort of evaluate you, I think, I get the impression, based on stuff like that, not necessarily what you said, but almost how you said it. That tends to
Yeah,
carry a lot of weight in these encounters for some
absolutely.
reason I don't quite understand.
Absolutely.
you
I
know?
think we all feel it. We all feel that intention behind it, what they're really it's what we say and what we really say,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Yep.
what we say with our words and what we really say with our body language, with our feeling, with our tone of voice. All that communicates in a huge way. The words are important, but they're only part of the story, and everyone knows it.
Yeah. Like if you talk to someone in a job interview, you talk to one candidate, and you say, here's a hypothetical problem. Okay. Now, how would you solve it? Like you come, you show up at your job one day and this has occurred, this emergency or this, minor crisis. How would you deal with it? And you ask one candidate and they go, oh, geez, I don't know. 'Cause, you know, they hesitate, they maybe waffle a little, and then it starts to come out very slowly what they might do. Right. But then you ask the same question to a different candidate, and they'd say, "Oh, well, the number one thing I would do is this. That comes first. You'd first make sure that everyone's okay, or whatever. Then I would check this because that's very important, and then thirdly, I would do this. And if that's all good, then I would do this other thing. And then if that's fine, then there's no real emergency. I would just get on with business as usual, something like that. And what that does is it conveys the impression that, oh, you've been in that situation before, or you've been in something very similar to it. And in any case, you would know how to handle yourself and you know what needs to be done. Um, the first candidate, they came across as someone that wouldn't really know how to handle that because they hesitated. They didn't have a ready-made answer. So we're not really going on the content. We're going on the delivery, like how people come across, right? And
Absolutely.
that can count when it comes to this issue about selling yourself. It can count against you if you have a real aversion to doing this, or you don't know how to express, like you want to brag about yourself or you want to state your accomplishments, but you don't know how to phrase it. So it comes across very hesitant. I think that's something we should definitely talk about, the, sort of the tactics of how to actually phrase some of this stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, 100%. It's a great point as well.
yeah.
Um, So in terms of the tactics, yeah, I think it's really nice to take an inventory of your. It's like if you're looking in the cupboard before you go shopping, right?
Mm.
You're looking in the pantry before you go shopping. You want to see, well, what do I have, and then I'll know how to describe it to somebody. So if you're putting down 5, 6, 10 sentences, I think it's good to write out like 10 sentences to pick, not to use all of them, but to pick the ones that you think are the best ones, right? Because
Yeah.
we don't want to just write down the minimum and then just communicate that, because maybe in a moment or two there's one or two better ones. So I would get people to write out their primary skills, and we can go into each one of these in detail. Right? So let's write out your primary skills, and we talk through that. What are your primary skills? What are your secondary skills? What's your biggest responsibility? So primary skills, secondary skills, biggest responsibility. What's your biggest achievement? What's an ability that you have that you can deliver over and over again?
Mm.
What are some soft skills you have? And maybe there's some technical skills you have. You might want to talk about your education, or you might want to talk about some IT software, right? So there's various different categories. You could lump them all together and call them strengths, right? But if you think of primary skills, to circle back to the start, what are your primary skills? Well, what are the 2 or 3 core things that make up your role? What is it that you do on a day-to-day basis? Like if you were to describe it to a 5-year-old, what would you say? They're the core things that make up the role. A lot of people will talk more about the tactics. They'll say, well, I write emails and I have meetings with people and I communicate with clients. But you could also say, well, I do team leading, right? I'm a team leader, so I do team leading. I do client relationship management instead of like, oh, I write emails and I talk to clients. Well, that client relationship management. And maybe there's a third thing that you do instead of saying I organize, I organize documents and, I work on different tasks. Maybe when you flesh that out with the person, they might say that's project management. So then you go with project management, client relationship management, and team leading, which sounds better than I organize things. I talk to people on the phone. I have meetings with my team, and I send some emails and messages here and there.
Yeah.
So that would be the first one. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Then the second one, I think, talking about like secondary skills. So what are the secondary skills you have? And the secondary skills are part of the primary skills. A good way to distinguish between them is you'll get paid for a primary skill, like project management, but you won't really get paid for a secondary skill, like good interpersonal skills or good presentation skills or good conflict resolution skills or, these types of things, good organization skills. It's good to have it. Everyone wants you to have it, but they probably won't pay you for it, but they will pay you for the primary skill. So you can put those in as well. Then the achievement. So being able to talk about the achievement by, talking about a powerful verb. I think if people use 1, 2, or 3 powerful verbs together, that can be a good way to talk about an achievement. For example, designed, developed, and delivered a web app that, and then put in a metric that, let's say, 1 million people downloaded. And then you can also talk about a result at the end. So you've got verb, 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 and then you've got like a metric, and then you've got a result, right? Which resulted in, ABC for the company, which resulted in securing funding from investors and, whatever it is. So that's kind of a formula for the achievement. Am I going into too much detail, Bill?
No, that makes perfect sense. Saying I do this, I can do this, I have done this.
Exactly.
And then, like you said, you back it up with some kind of quantification. Is that a word?
Yeah, metric or quantification.
Metric. Yeah. And what I know is for like higher level management stuff, when they talk about like resumes and putting accomplishments, what I was told many, many years ago by some high level executive recruiter was your accomplishments, they use 2 metrics. One is percentage. Mm-hmm. The other one is currency. Mm-hmm. So you could say, I did this and it resulted in, a savings of $100,000 over, a fiscal year or something. Or I did this and it resulted in a 21% efficiency gain or reduction in lead time, something like that. Yeah. So you quantify it with percentages or with currency, like what the impact was, right?
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one.
Yeah. Now I don't know if, I'm sure you could do other things too, but that's what I had heard many years ago. And so that's what I've done.
I think it's a good one. You can, so you're talking about the quantifiable metrics. You can also talk about, if you're going to talk about quantitative, you can talk about qualitative as well. So a simple way I would say is like, let's talk about the fact, which is the number, and let's talk about the feeling, right? Because if you achieve these big results and your team is so tired and upset with you because you did everything to get the result, that they don't talk to you, that's not much of a result. So being able to say that, we delivered a great result, we sold a million apps, and we had a 10% reduction in team attrition, or if we had a very satisfied team, then that can be good as well. So you're talking about the fact and the feeling, and that way we know you care not just about the results, but also about the people who are getting the results.
Yeah, and I think that also extends to if you're describing like we're talking about strengths, right? Like we're not just talking about achievements where you can quantify something, but you're talking about strengths. So something that you do, maybe one of your strengths is that you solve problems in some capacity, right? So anything to do with, I don't know, loan approval or whatever you do at a bank or something, that's you, they go to you and you say like, whatever issue it is, I will find a solution. That's my job. I'm quite confident in my ability to be able to find a solution for almost anything you would encounter when it comes to a loan approval, and even at the end of the day, if you can't make a success of it, where, you get a loan approved, what I do is I talk to the client and I at least help them understand what's going on behind the scenes so that, first of all, they're not as upset over this denial of like a loan or whatever. They understand, why. They understand what they would have to do to get it approved, right? They understand how everything works, right? And they go away feeling like, okay, it's not a good outcome, but at least, I'm on good terms. I have a good business relationship with this bank or whatever, and I appreciate them taking the trouble to help me understand what's going on. Something like that. So you're talking about the feeling. You try and get a positive outcome in some way, shape, or form, and so
100%. Yeah.
yeah, like things like this. We have skills, strengths, and achievements. Uh, they're all slightly different, aren't they? I mean, we
Yeah.
talk about achievements with the quantification. What would you talk about like skills or strengths? Like how would you,
Yeah.
first of all,
So
define those?
the skills are something we can do repeatedly to a high level. So we talked about the primary skills and the secondary skills. Primary skills like project management, client relationship management, communications, uh, operations. These are all kind of core skills. The secondary skills, we talked about the interpersonal skills, conflict resolution, organization skills, presentation skills. Um, then you've got we talked about the achievements as well, always attributing metrics to those. And then you've got strengths. Let's say, all those other things that we want to talk about, we can put them into a nice bucket called strengths. We could talk about abilities that we have, like you mentioned, Bill, ability to solve problems. So if somebody's got an ability to solve complex problems, to the technical issues, then that's where we're talking about. Education is a strength. Continuous professional development is a strength. All of these other items that you might want to put in, we can group them as strengths. Let's say languages, maybe you speak 1, 2, or 3 languages. That's a strength that's worth noting as well. If you've got specialist knowledge of something, if you're a specialist in a certain type of computer software, or if you're a specialist with a certain type of machine or technology or computer language, then that's worth saying as well. So you've got those all grouped together as the strengths. Does that sound
Yeah,
right?
that makes a lot of sense. I think that strengths, at a higher level, people are known for their style of doing things, or like some people are like, you could take it there. Where to start? There's so many dimensions here. Like think of like introvert, extrovert types.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are more introverts, but they can really focus on technical challenges and solve them. Other people, that might not be their strength. That's not what they enjoy doing. They don't have an affinity of doing that to do that very well, but perhaps they can uh, collaborate with a lot of people, get a group to work together very well, to make everyone in the group want to participate and want to communicate with the others in the group. And that's the strength that they have. They facilitate that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Other people, they find some of the technical details extremely fascinating, and they want to get into like all these details that other people would quite frankly be really bored doing, and that becomes their strength, because whenever you have a challenge like that, you give it to that person, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like there's all these different things, and they're all very individualistic, right? That's how I would see
I think that's
some
a super
strengths.
point, Bill, and I hope people have stayed around to watch this far, because I think if somebody is tuned in now and that's the one thing they hear, I hope they hear that, because it's so important. If you can figure out what your biggest strength is, that you can really narrow down on that. If you can figure out, in other words, what's easy for you, what you can do repeatedly over and over again, what people come to you for, if you could figure out that, like what that strength is, like you said, whether it's making people feel comfortable or so on, that is something that you should really double down on. That is something that you should explore and you should take advantage of, because when it's easy for you, you can continue to do it. It's easier for you to develop expertise. It's easy for you to be the go-to person with that sort of thing. That's how you can be confident. That's how you can hold a lot of value. And that's how you can easily progress. If something feels like it's like pushing a boulder up the hill, and every day is a struggle and every day is a difficult, maybe it's time to reassess your skills and see if there's something that is closer to your heart and closer to your natural skill set, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Before we wrap this up, I wanted to respond to a couple of comments, but also I think that we should talk a little bit more about like the tactics of how you do this. Just
Mhm.
to lead us off very briefly, I would say if you don't know how to phrase this stuff, you're trying to blow your own horn. You're trying to sort of talk yourself up and give somebody a very quick rundown of the value that you can bring to the table. Um, if you're just starting out, I would say one phrase where we would start out is you say, I have this. Okay, I have this skill, I have this education, I have this ability. Um, Maybe another way would be to say, this is what I can do for you. I can make sure that, this is done properly. I can make sure this is done on time. I can make sure this is done to a high quality standard. I don't know. Maybe another way to say to phrase this stuff is, I take pride in my ability to, do whatever, to process loan applications, to follow company rules, to interact with people in the workplace and make sure that everyone has a good working relationship. I take pride in my ability to do those things. I mean, how else would one phrase these kind of things, Ronan? Like, I'm sure there's like many ways we
Yeah,
could
yeah, yeah.
phrase it.
Yeah, there's tons of ways of doing it. I think a simple way is to use verbs, right?
Mm.
What's the one, two, or three verbs you really want people to hear? Because that's the action that we're interested in,
Can
right?
you
So
give an example, like, so people can like have that illustrated?
yeah, for sure. If somebody, let's say you said, created, developed, and launched a YouTube channel, gaining over 320,000 subscribers in a 4-year period. That would be an example of somebody creating, developing, and launching. You've also got a metric in there, and you've got a timeline, which allows us to box it all off. If somebody was, let's say, working with a team, you could say that let's say they have coached, mentored, and trained a team of 5 high performers to deliver exceptional results to clients on a ongoing basis, right? So having those 2 or 3 verbs together, and then the outcome or the result that we're hoping to achieve with those is a simple way to communicate that idea. That's when we're talking about the skills. If you're talking about abilities, you might want to come at it from a different angle. If you're always talking about technical things, on the other hand, you might want to talk about people things. So you might want to say, proven ability to resolve conflicts with multiple different stakeholders and to achieve harmonious results. Or you might say proven ability to solve complex problems. If you're talking about, let's say, a responsibility that you have, you could just say responsibility for doing, X, Y, and Z, and just outline what that is. Yeah, as you said, Bill, there's a million ways probably, but
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
some of my favorite.
I really like the first thing you said. You said like something, like it was a YouTube thing. You said like, I have done this. I have developed a YouTube channel. I've launched it with, and then you had a number in there with this many subscribers. Those are great because like it speaks for itself. If you say like, I've built a company from nothing to producing
Mm,
this much profit per year, single-handedly, you know,
mm.
that speaks for itself. It's hard for anyone to poke holes in that, especially when you've got numbers behind it, right?
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know,
It's just 100% fact. And every
yeah,
word in that sentence is necessary. Another way, if you're talking about a project or if you're talking about something that's on a quite a long continuum, might be difficult to say those steps. So you can also say, I designed and delivered this from A and B all the way through to Y and Z, and then you've got that
yeah.
developed a website and an app from design and inception all the way through to launch and promotion. So you've got like a slightly different structure there to
But I think that's very powerful when you say like, I did this, I developed this thing, it came from A and B, and then when or when I left or right now as I'm still there, we have this low level of defects or something like that, like something that just speaks for itself, that summarizes what you've done and what you can do, and you've got a couple of numbers behind it or one
Mhm.
number behind it. It just makes it really rock solid, and someone can
Yep.
just in that one phrase they can see your value right there,
Mhm.
when I started, it was a shambles. We had terrible customer relationships. After 5 years in the role, now, mainly thanks to me and a couple of assistants I have, we have achieved this with this low level of, issues or rejects or, whatever. It speaks for itself. It's very, very powerful, and all you're doing is you're really just summarizing what it is that you do. It's not really a brag or a boast. It's not you trying to behave in a very grandiose way where you're taking credit for all kinds of things that, maybe it's kind of a stretch. It's like, it's just very genuine. And it comes across very well because you know what to say, you know what to pick out. That's like a high level summary of what you do. What's the effect that you have? And it summarizes what you do in like one simple point, that can be extremely powerful,
Yeah, fantastic.
I would say to people, like, if this is you're struggling with how to do this stuff, practice makes perfect. So like, do a little bit of work, where you sort of look at your resume and you pull out maybe a good way of summarizing what it is you do or what you can do. See if you can get, some kind of, like Ronan said, some kind of quantifiable metric behind it, just to illustrate, we went from this to this. We went from processing 4 claims a day to 400 claims a day under, my tenure there, something like that. Very powerful stuff. And then all you have to do when someone prompts you for your value or your accomplishments is you just pull out that one or two phrases, and if they do want you to talk about it more and keep going, you can pull out all kinds of other aspects of what you do and what's important to you that is most likely important to them too.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's 100% it, Bill. That's a great point. And that I don't want to go on too long, but there's one other aspect of that if you do find yourself telling that story, to be able to tell it in a nice, concise, and succinct way. I use a very, very simple thing. I use 4 words to help people tell stories, right? Because they say, like, if somebody asks me about this project that I've just told them about, like getting all these followers on YouTube or delivering this project or selling this website, whatever it is, how do I tell them about that? It says 4 words: understand, plan, implement, and evaluate. What did you have to understand when you were starting? Like, you have to understand the needs, the requirements, the concerns, the process, the resources, the technology, the people involved. You have to understand all these things. How did you go about making that plan and communicating it and getting buy-in and all that sort of good stuff? How did you implement it? And then finally evaluate it. That would be one final
that's good.
idea.
That's good. It's a good way to think about this stuff. The better you are at being able to articulate the value you bring, the more opportunities will open up for you. And like we talked about at the beginning, I mean, this applies in job interviews, but it also applies in many other situations. Something that a lot of people talk about on YouTube in this kind of space is getting a promotion. And we mentioned it briefly earlier, where you talk to your boss and either you're pushing to get promoted or you're trying to float the idea or to see, if that's in the cards, or to make a case for yourself, and it just sort of, it might also be impromptu. It might not be a very cold, calculated thing that you've planned for. It just sort of, you're talking to your boss one day and all of a sudden it comes up and you're put on the spot and you have to sort of make a case for yourself. Maybe your boss tells you, oh, we're thinking of promoting somebody. And, I was thinking of somebody from that department, what are your thoughts, or something like that. And you're put on the spot. And, once again, your ability to be able to articulate your value and what you can do for people is very, very important. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It would be lovely if we lived in a perfect world where, you didn't have to sort of make a lot of fuss and people would just recognize you. And,
if only.
But being visible, like you put it, Ronan, increasing your visibility at work. I think it's a great thing for people to be tuned into.
But you know what? I also think it's like, I also think it's a service for the other person, because think about it, like in your own life, Bill, in your own work, when you have a problem with something and you want a solution, whether it's maybe you want a new car, and that's a problem that you're trying to find the best car for your needs, or whether you want a new computer, a new printer. This is a problem that you're trying to figure out, you're trying to solve. And if someone comes and they sell you a solution in a very clear way that responds exactly to your requirements, that deals with your concerns, right? Aren't they doing you a favor by
Yes.
actually selling to you, as opposed to saying, look, I don't want to sell you this car, this computer, Bill. You have a look and you think about what you want. You're like, what? But I'm not an expert in cars and I'm not an expert in computers. Whereas if someone
Yeah.
comes and they do that for you, I really think they're doing you a
That's
service.
another, sorry to interrupt. That's another great way of looking at it. It's like you're informing somebody. You're not there to like, talk them up about something. I'm here to convince you to do this. It's like, no, I'm just explaining, like, you want to know what I've done and what I can do here. I'm just informing you. Here's what I can do. Here's what I have done. Here's what I know how to do. Uh, here's what I did last week. Here's what I did last month. You're just sort of informing somebody, right? So if you have a sort of psychological aversion to this kind of thing and you've never really done it, and you're consequently you don't feel you're very good at it, just think of it in terms of you're informing someone of what can you do and what have you done,
and allowing them make an informed decision.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of comments here. So continuous improvement says, Bill, hope this is helpful. My partner, after an initial struggle, landed her dream job. We put work history on page 2 of her CV, and what on page 1 puts skills and key accomplishments. Okay. That's kind of like a hybrid resume. It sounds like, where it's not all chronological, but that makes sense. Matej says something very nice. Jay Bink says, my goatee looks good. Yeah, that's laziness. This is laziness. I'm usually clean shaven. So, yeah, I'm not growing a handlebar mustache. This is a joke I've made before. I said there's not many CEOs with handlebar mustaches for a reason. But no, I'm not growing a handlebar mustache. You couldn't get away with that in most circles, most professional circles. Although things are changing, right? There's always there's people with like full beard. I just saw something in Europe. They had a ceremony, military ceremony, and there were a few foot soldiers with like the full beard going, like they're active duty.
Yeah. New trend, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, I'd never seen that before. It was always like, you had to be clean shaven, like at all times,
Which country
maybe
was
a lot
it?
of mustache, little mustache, like with,
which country was it? Was it,
I think it was Britain, actually. I think it was, some ceremony for somebody, at like Operation Market Garden or something. They'd found a body from, a long time ago, and they were interring it or something. But yeah, you're allowed to have like a little military mustache, but it's just the full kind of thing here going on. So things are changing. So you never know. Wiss says, very true. Qualification adds more emphasis to your value as a professional. It means backing up your claims with factual data based on your previous performance. Exactly. And, like, this is very matter of fact. It's like Ronan was saying, it's very matter of fact. It's, this is what I've done, and here's some metrics, and that's maybe one way to warm to this kind of thinking, right? And being able to say some of the stuff without being specifically prompted for details. They would ask you something very general, like explain your value or what can you bring to the table or something like that. And you can say this kind of stuff because you're just explaining, what you've done. So yeah, so thank you for everybody who participated in the chat. That's nice to get some comments there. I see there's 21 people here. Before we wrap up, Ronan, do you have any sort of things that you want to get in that we didn't cover, or points you'd like to make at the last minute?
I think we've covered everything pretty well. I suppose if there was one last point I'd get in, it could be worth. I suppose a few takeaways is, definitely write down your skills, your strengths, your achievements, your abilities, your education. Try the exercise of victory stacking to make sure that you always build confidence and you can always talk about what you're doing. And the one other thing I would say is a question to ask yourself is, what do you do and what do you really do? Now, we've talked a lot about what you do today, which is your skills, your abilities, your strengths, right? But the last question is, what do you do and what do you really do? Which is like, what is the result people really get behind just that initial point that you say? And I'll give you an example. If you look at the case of Starbucks, what do Starbucks sell and what do they really sell? Well, people say Starbucks sell coffee, right? And they do sell coffee and sandwiches and all that sort of stuff. But what do they really sell? They sell space, right?
They sell like a positive experience, because you go in there and you drink coffee and you have cakes or whatever, and it's a place to sit, it's a place to relax, it's a place to think,
Exactly.
meet people, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So Starbucks actually understand their business model as the third space. They know they're not your home, they're not your office, they're your third space. So they've set up their business so that you can be in that space in between, right? You can have a coffee, you can use the internet, you can work there, you can do phone calls, you can meet friends for hours, you can spend hours there, in other words. And if you think about that on a personal level, what do you do and what do you really do? If you think of your case, Bill, obviously you help people with their interviews and so on. But what do you really do a layer behind that, right? I'll start with myself first, and then I'll hand it over to you. So, I'm a career coach, so I help people, understand their skills, their strengths, and their achievements, and find direction and write applications and do interviews. But really, I hope I help people gain clarity about who they are and what their value is and where they want to go next, and build confidence in that process. That's what I really hope I do. Do you know what I mean? Like an extra layer. So if I was to ask you, obviously you help people with interviews and so on, but that's what you do. But what do you really do behind that?
That's interesting. Nobody's asked me that ever. I'd like to think from my perspective that, I answer questions about interviews and stuff, but I try and help people see how things really work. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of interested parties that would have you believe a certain thing because it's advantageous for them if you believe something or do something. But that might not necessarily be the truth, or it might not be accurate, or it might not be the best thing for you. And so I try and provide, like you said, a bit of clarity from a business perspective of how businesses actually run and what they would have you do, and what of that is in your own best interest and what isn't in your own best interest.
That's super. That's so interesting. That's so interesting, right? So on one level, you're helping with interviews, but on another level, you're providing all this clarity, this insider knowledge, these like tips, all this knowledge that you've built up over the years that allows people to really see the inner mechanics and the workings of businesses so they can work effectively.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for anyway. So, but this has been great, Ronan. This is the first time we've done this, and we should definitely do it again. I'm actually trying to do an episode of Career Expert Roundtable every week at this time.
Fantastic.
So,
I would love to. I'd love to join again if you'll have me.
Yeah, you should definitely come back, and we'll do this, and preferably we'll get even more people together and see, because it's interesting. A lot of people have different perspectives on this stuff, and there's quite a bit of overlap, but there's also quite a bit of differences, and I think that would be interesting to explore, right?
100%.
Because like if you think about a job interview question, someone says, "Tell me about yourself." That could be for any job, for like minimum wage all the way to the CEO or something. It could be in any industry, it could be in any country. You know what I mean? So like a one size fits all answer, I don't think exists. It would be different answers depending on the details. And that's why I think a lot of people's perspectives differ slightly on this stuff. So I think it's all equally valid. It just that it applies in different situations. So I think it's all good.
For sure.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks, Rona. Thanks to everybody who joined us. And we'll be back next week for another episode of Career Expert Roundtable. We'll see you then. Take care.
Thanks so much.